Why now is he building the border wall? Why now is FEMA doing a national emergency test?
Is the relationship between Israel and the United States really anywhere near as strong as it used to be? Or has Biden totally fucked that up just like he fucks up everything else?
I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjekovic, and we are unapologetically outspoken. Hey everyone, welcome to Monday's episode. So obviously the big news from the weekend is what's been happening with Israel and Palestine. But before we get into that, I just want to give a couple updates from last week about what's been happening in Congress, especially after the McCarthy debacle. And I also want to clarify the White House stance on suddenly deciding to go ahead with border wall construction, because all of this is actually relative to what's going on in the rest of the world. So in terms of our shit show Congress, drama continues. Business Insider reported on Saturday that after McCarthy was ousted from his position as House Speaker, there was a group of 45 GOP lawmakers who are demanding changes to House rules. And they apparently got together and they all signed a letter saying that they were, quote, ashamed and embarrassed by what happened on the floor last week. And they refused to allow the 8 members who abandoned and undermined our conference to dictate every outcome in policy and personnel for the remainder of this Congress, including the upcoming selection of Speaker of the House, end quote. So as the author of this article put it, what this is doing is basically throwing a proverbial wrench into the ongoing speakership drama. You've got Republicans possessing this very slim majority in the House already, and all it takes is a simple majority to amend House rules. So it's going to depend on whether a contingency of Democrats decides to take back the motion. And I didn't know this, Stephanie, but I guess when Pelosi was Speaker of the House, she was able to get the rules changed. And so she added like these additional layers of difficulty in filing a motion to vacate. But then when Republicans took back control of the House in after the 2022 election, one of the concessions made by the GOP was going back to this rule that ensured it would only take one member to file a motion to vacate. And so we mentioned last week that this was the first time in history that a House Speaker has ever been ousted. And the Washington Examiner reported that these 45 Republican lawmakers are calling what happened, quote, one of the most consequential votes the House has taken in over a century. So I think that says a lot.
Wait, so they can go back on this? Like they're talking about how they could possibly like take away that motion and get him
Yeah,
back
but
in?
I don't know if it would get him back in, but they could take away this rule that
Oh,
they
yeah.
came
Okay.
up with. So, but that would require a cooperation that I don't think everyone's going to do.
Right.
So, and then you know how we talked about like Steve Scalise and Jim Jordan being the front runners for replacing McCarthy?
Hmm.
Well, I read another Business Insider article that was talking about how, you know how you mentioned like they're actually friends and they're
Yeah.
on the same page with pretty much everything. And I guess the one issue they don't agree on is aid to Ukraine. Okay, so Jim Jordan has consistently voted against measures to keep giving Ukraine money and security assistance. And he believes that protecting our own border is the most pressing issue for Americans, while Scalise is apparently in support of continuing to aid Ukraine. So I was reading an article in Politico that was speculating that if Jordan getting the position is probably going to hinge on him making a deal with Matt Gaetz to stop giving aid to Ukraine. But if he's pressured and caves like McCarthy did, then he faces basically the same position of getting ousted. So it's like everything is still up in the air for now. And we're just going to have to wait and see how this shit show unfolds.
Great.
And then I also wanted to comment on like the new border wall issue. So, we talked, I think it was on Friday, about how the Biden administration announced a total reversal in their previous stance on border security and suddenly decided to start building a wall. And so when that happened, like Republicans were super excited and the Democrats were crying. And if you didn't listen to this episode, both Stephanie and I were questioning this motive because this move by Biden is just shady as fuck. But what specifically did Biden say about his reasons for deciding to suddenly construct a border wall? Well, I read in the Daily Caller that Biden told reporters he tried to get his administration to redirect the money, but under the law, he can't. So specifically, he said, quote, "The border wall money was appropriated for the border wall. I tried to get them to reappropriate, to redirect that money. They didn't, they wouldn't. In the meantime, there's nothing under the law other than they have to use the money for what it was appropriated for. I can't stop that." End quote. So the reporter then asked Biden if he thinks the border wall is effective, and his only response was to say no. And so KJP, in her like typical style of a no response, she made a press statement saying, quote, "What I can tell you is that this is a law that we're complying with. We've asked Congress multiple times to reappropriate this. This is not the way we believe is going to be effective here." So clearly they don't want to build the wall, right? And so when this news comes out, like AOC totally slammed Biden for this decision. And she basically said that like the Biden administration is not obligated to expand border wall construction, and that it was certainly not obligated to waive all of those environmental laws to expedite construction. And as much as I fucking despise her, like she has a very valid point. And I still think something really shady is going on here. Like, why are they doing this now? For 2 years, this administration is completely against putting up the border wall. And then all of a sudden they shift course and they basically give the excuse that they're going to go ahead with building it because they realized that they can't reappropriate the funds, but they still think the wall isn't effective. Like that doesn't add up for me. Don't you think this
No.
is weird?
Yeah, it makes no sense. Like, so you're saying for 2 years, it was okay that it was appropriated for the wall, but they didn't build the wall. But like now all of a sudden it's so urgent that they have to bypass all of these laws and like get it up immediately,
Right.
and I just have to bring up the strange coincidences in this week alone. It's like, he's in a rush to build a border wall after, what was it, like a week ago, we were talking about how he was trying to sell the wall supplies.
Yeah.
And, he hasn't done anything to stop the flow of illegal migrants in the past 2 years. Then, on Wednesday, we had that national FEMA test alert that went out to every phone, radio, and TV in the nation. Then Saturday, war breaks out in Israel. And I feel like there's a lot going on right now. And I feel like there's a piece of the puzzle that they're not telling us, because it's just a lot of things happening in 1 week. And I think that they could all be somehow related. Um, like, is it a coincidence that there was a huge surge of men illegally crossing into Europe this past week? Are the men that have been coming into America part of the same group? The fact that Biden is building a border wall has to mean something. There has to be something they don't know. Like, he campaigned on ending the border wall. He's not going to all of a sudden change that, like, while he's trying to campaign again to remain president. So, like, there is definitely something going on to where they feel they need to build this ASAP. And I just wish that we knew what that was.
Yeah. And it's a little scary. And then now there's always shady shit happening with our government, right? Always. But when you take a look at like what's happened with Israel and Palestine this weekend, it's becoming even more apparent. Like, I don't think we've ever talked about the tensions between Israel and Palestine, but for anyone who has not been paying attention to the news, a Palestinian terrorist group called Hamas took control of the Gaza Strip back in 2007. And like since then, they've had this ongoing conflict. And then on Saturday, Hamas executed this supposedly unprovoked attack on Israel. And they launched thousands of rockets from the Gaza Strip into Israel. And this is being considered the most intense attack on Israel in years.
Yeah, I was really surprised because I woke up to this on Saturday and almost immediately, when I was looking at this, I saw that the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared a state of war after these attacks had happened. And he announced that he was mobilizing Israeli forces to strike back, saying, quote, "I am initiating an extensive mobilization of the reserves to fight back on a scale and intensity that the enemy has so far not experienced. The enemy will pay an unprecedented price," end quote.
Yeah, and I know Israeli media outlets, like as of Sunday afternoon, they were reporting over 300 Israelis have been killed, including children. There's over 1,400 people that have been injured. I saw other reports of over 600 deaths. And I think it's important to point out that this attack occurred during a Jewish holiday. So Saturday was the end of a week-long Jewish harvest festival called Sukkot. And I know I probably butchered that and didn't pronounce it right. But Netanyahu is like striking back with a vengeance. And he told the people of Gaza, he said, quote, get out from there now because we will act everywhere and with all the power. And basically the Israeli military is going to turn all Hamas hiding places in Gaza into rubble. Like he's not fucking around. And I guess this is the first time Israeli has declared war since the 1970s.
Yeah. And just to give a little bit of context around this, since we really haven't talked much about it, Gaza is a small part of Palestine under control of the paramilitary group Hamas, like you said. And Israel ended up sending fighter jets to bomb the Hamas target and mobilized ground forces. They attacked 17 of the military compounds and then 4 of the military Hamas headquarters. And the Hamas military took Israeli citizens and soldiers as hostages and shared some very disturbing footage of them. Sunday morning, Secretary of State Antony Blinken made an announcement and he said, quote, we have reports that several Americans may be among the dead. We've seen reports about hostages and we're very actively trying to verify them, end quote. And then you have this video going around of Iran's parliament chanting death to Israel, death to America, that's making its rounds all over the internet. And these are the people that Biden just released $6 billion to last month. And I would really like to know how many of the military aged men that have poured into our country over the past 2 years were from these areas. Like it's very concerning. And then you have Senator Marsha Blackburn saying, quote, just weeks ago, the Biden administration handed over $6 billion to Iran, and today innocent Israelis were murdered by Iran-backed terrorists. We must continue to support our strongest ally in the Middle East and their right to defend themselves against these unprovoked, horrific attacks, end quote.
Okay, but here's the question. Is Israel really still our strongest ally in the Middle East? Because even CNN is reporting that there have been like these strained ties between Biden and Netanyahu for a while now. And this all goes back to, I think it was in July, there was an incident like Netanyahu is attempting like he was attempting to overhaul the judicial system in the government. And Biden was very forcefully speaking out against it. And he was basically trying to pressure Netanyahu into not doing the changes that Biden didn't like. And they have very differing views on what democracy is. And Biden basically told Netanyahu that if he passed the legislation, it was going to risk the relationship between the US and Israel. And I guess Biden sat down with a New York Times reporter back in July and talked about this whole thing. And the reporter's take on it was basically that, like, okay, if we're not seen to share that democratic value, it's going to be difficult to sustain the special relationship that Israel and America have enjoyed for the last 75 years for another 75 years. And so after that disagreement, their relationship has been strange. Biden did not invite him to the White House. He delayed any kind of face-to-face meeting until they had to meet at the UN meeting in New York last month. And then I also read, I think it was a Politico article, that while Republicans have been pressuring Biden to do more to support Israel and weaken Iran, you've got the progressive Democrats who want him to be tough on Israel and because of their supposed, anti-democracy stance. So where does the Biden administration really stand on what's happening? And then just hours after the attack, the Democratic Socialists of America, which we've talked about this group a couple of weeks ago. This is the party with 6 members of Congress, including Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Jamal Bowman, and AOC are all part of this party. And the Democratic Socialists of America's response was to host a quote, all out for Palestine rally in Times Square on Sunday. And the organizers told people to wear masks so they wouldn't be recognized or identified. So is the relationship between Israel and the United States really anywhere near as strong as it used to be? Or has Biden totally fucked that up just like he fucks up everything else?
Of course he fucked it up. It's like just when you think he can't screw up any more than he already has on the world stage, he does it again. Like, and this has to be on purpose. Like, I don't know how someone can screw up at this level this quickly. It's just unbelievable. Trump took to Truth Social to slam Biden's incompetence, saying, quote, Joe Biden's ineptitude, weakness, and incompetence has led to this horrible attack on Israel, and it'll only get worse. Just 4 years ago, we had the signing of the historic Abraham Accords, and today we have an attack on Israel. What a difference a president makes, end quote. He's absolutely right. 2 years ago, we had peace in the Middle East, something I never thought I would see in my lifetime. Now we have this war breaking out, and we have Iran making a nuclear weapon, along with the Taliban getting $84 billion worth of our military equipment as a result of Biden's botched Afghanistan withdrawal. And I just want to make the point that Trump is the guy who the media was so worried about, saying that he'd get us into a nuclear conflict. Yet while he was president, not only did our enemies like North Korea, China, and Russia stay at bay with no provoked attacks or threats, but there were peace deals being made all around the world. And now, under Biden, who was portrayed as this like sweet old grandpa type that has a ton of foreign relations experience, we're dealing with the Ukraine war. China is making a lot of threats. There's an invasion at our own border, and now this. So I think we know who the real warmonger is. And then you have Donald Trump Jr., who tweeted or X'd, I don't know how we're saying that now. But he said, quote, every single disaster they said would happen under Trump is happening under Biden's radical leftist government. Every single one, end quote. And then he also tweeted, how is it that I've seen more videos out of this war in Israel in a few hours than I have from Ukraine in almost 2 years, end quote. Like, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
Saturday morning, like I said, from the moment I woke up until the moment I went to bed, all of my social media accounts were flooded with video of what was happening in Israel. And I mean, horrendous videos going around of women being taken and held hostage, people being killed, bombs going off. Yet we haven't seen hardly any video at all of what's going on in Ukraine over the past 2 years. Like, isn't that strange? Like, I never thought about it until now seeing all these videos in Israel. And I think that's really weird. And I also want to reiterate what Trump had said in that CNN interview this year when he was asked about the Ukrainian war. He said he wants people to stop dying. He didn't look at it as winning or losing. He simply wanted the dying to stop. And I also want to read the statement that Trump made on September 11th of this year. He said, can you believe that crooked Joe Biden is giving $6 billion to the terrorist regime in Iran? That money will be used for terrorism all over the Middle East and indeed the world. This incompetent fool is absolutely destroying America. He had the audacity to announce this terrible deal today, September 11th. To pay for hostages will lead to kidnapping, ransom, and blackmail against Americans across the globe. I freed many dozens of our people from various unfriendly countries and never paid a dime. And you know what? That's the difference between a strong leader and a weak one. And first of all, the initial attacks in Israel happened overnight, and Biden didn't address this until 2:30 p.m. the following day. And the first message was actually from the United States Office for Palestinian Affairs, who posted on X calling on Israelis to, quote, refrain from violence and retaliatory attacks, end quote. Like, what the heck?
I'm so glad you found that because my mom had told me about that. And I said, I don't see anything on that anywhere.
They
and
deleted it.
Yeah, she said, I saw it on Newsmax. And I said, well, I can't find it anywhere. So I'm so glad that you saw that on X.
Yeah, and they quickly deleted it because there was public outrage. Everyone's like, "Are you kidding me? Like, are they really saying that Israel should not be, defending themselves and fighting back?" Um, and I'm just gonna read Biden's remarks because listening to the video, it's just embarrassing. I can't do it. Like, he can barely get through a sentence. He sounds like he's about to fall asleep at the podium, and as usual, he scurries away before answering any questions. Like, a new war has broke out and he won't answer a single question from reporters. It's unbelievable. So Biden says he made it clear to Netanyahu in a phone call that his administration is, quote, ready to offer all appropriate means of support to Israel and its people. Terrorism is never justified. Israel has a right to defend itself and its people. The United States warns against any other party hostile to Israel seeking advantage in this situation. My administration's support for Israel's security is rock solid and unwavering, end quote. Well, according to everything that you had just said, Tara, like, I don't think his words hold much weight. I don't think he is solid or unwavering.
No, I don't either. And I want to point out something that was also in the Politico article. The author was saying that it's not only what Biden said about rock solid and unwavering support for Israel, it's what he didn't say that was equally important. And so what about Palestine? Like, again, we recently gave Iran access to this $6 billion in this hostage exchange deal. And we're trying to make this deal between, Saudi and Israel. And so Biden didn't mention Palestinian rights. He didn't mention suffering under Israeli occupation. And this is something that the Democrats have been very vocal about, like that thing I just mentioned with the rally that they're doing on Sunday. So it's likely that, US politics are going to play a very significant role in how this whole conflict plays out. And the timing of this happening ahead of the 2024 election is going to be a critical issue here in the United States. And NBC News referred to this war between Israel and Palestine as one of the most perilous foreign policy crises that Biden has ever faced. And so I also read a report in CBS News, and there's a guy named Bruce Riddell. He's a former CIA officer and a Middle East specialist. And he said that the attacks on Israel by Hamas is an enormous intelligence failure for both the US and Israel because neither nation knew it was coming. And the article states, quote, as a sitting president who pledged to restore confidence in the foreign policy arena, Biden now faces accusations from political opponents that global trouble spots are multiplying on his watch. Riddell also stated the Biden administration has spent an enormous amount of effort to work on the Israeli-Saudi normalization agreement. That's probably dead in the water now. Once there are pictures of hundreds of Palestinian casualties, including women and children, the Saudi population is not going to be willing to accept a normalization agreement, end quote. So, and then there's this other issue of what's going to happen now because Hezbollah has joined the fight, and that is an Iran-backed Lebanon-based terrorist army that's actually way more trained and better armed than Hamas, and they control southern Lebanon. And on Sunday, Hezbollah fired dozens of rockets and mortars at Israel in solidarity with Hamas. So coming back to Biden's quote stern warning about not provoking any extra conflict, is this going to result in any action on our part like we've done in getting heavily involved in Ukraine? Are you going to start seeing members of Congress wearing I stand with Israel pins or I stand with Palestine pins, putting up different flags on their social pages? Or is Israel not important enough because the Democrats are more supportive of Palestine and, Biden doesn't have millions of dollars being fraudulently funneled and embezzled through Israel for his personal gain? Netanyahu made it very clear that Israel is going to continue this fight and that they are willing to embark on a long and difficult war, no matter how prolonged of a campaign it is. So are we going to support Israel the same way we've been supporting Ukraine for the past 2 years if this goes on indefinitely? And then the CBS News article I read also pointed out that while the Biden administration is saying there's no evidence that the $6 billion we gave Iran was used to finance the attacks, and this is being spread as disinformation because our administration said that the money can only be used for medicine and food and humanitarian purposes, and those were the conditions that we placed on Iran. But then the Iranian president told NBC News in an interview that his government would decide how to spend the money. So they're going to do whatever they want with it. So don't tell me that none of that money was used for this attack. Like, the timing of this whole thing is far too coincidental. And you know that I don't believe in coincidences.
No, it's absurd. It's like you're giving a hostile government money and then you're saying, oh, only use it for medicine. Like, you think
Right.
they're going to listen? I mean, give
Yeah.
me a break. But that is such a good point about the Democrats being for the Palestinians. Like, I remember there was a big incident where Kamala was sticking up for Palestinians when she was talking at a school a while back. And people were like, what is she doing? And, we know who this is great news for. This is great news for the military industrial complex, which includes a lot of these members of the establishment uniparty, because now there's an increased demand for artillery shells. And it's a good point you brought up, Tara. It's like, okay, are they going to support Israel in the same way they supported Ukraine with all this
Right.
funding? Where are they going to get it from? And, I'm sure they're going to do whatever they can to drag this out as long as possible. But earlier this year, the US took shells from its stockpile in Israel and sent them to Ukraine. So the US might now have to decide which ally is going to receive these limited supplies. I mean,
Right.
I would love to know what Biden's strategy is on this. Then I came across a Newsweek article, and this was from all the way back in June, that read, quote, high-ranking Israel Defense Forces commander told Newsweek that Israel is concerned over the risk of weapons provided by the United States and other Western nations to Ukraine ending up in the hands of Israel's foes in the Middle East, including Iran, end quote. So they saw this coming. I mean, they saw what was happening here. All of these weapons that went to Ukraine could be in the hands of Iran soldiers right now. Like, where else would a terrorist group get 9,000 rockets? Maybe Afghanistan and the $58 billion worth of equipment we left there, or maybe Ukraine is making a buck off of it and selling it to them. Who knows? But there sure are a lot of videos circulating of these terrorists driving around in what appears to be U.S. military vehicles using what appears to be U.S. type military weapons. So I wonder.
Well, the United States has, like, I guess, $1.8 billion worth of weapons stored in Israel. But like you said, some of those have already been given to Ukraine. And Congress has to approve Israel using any of the remaining cash. So this is going to be interesting, especially since Congress can't even make any decisions right now. And so whatever Biden does, like, it's all going to be decided with his phenomenal foreign policy expertise. And you mentioned this earlier, how, like, he's this whole foreign policy expert. And I don't know if you remember this, but a few months ago, and this NBC News article that I was reading actually brought this up. Remember earlier in the year, Biden made a statement about himself and his foreign policy expertise. Do you remember that? Because I'm going to read the
Vaguely.
statement. Okay. So what he said, quote, I'm going to say something outrageous. I think I know as much about American foreign policy as anybody living, including Dr. Henry Kissinger. That's what I've done my whole life for the last 270 years, end quote. Like, fucking idiot, right? And then lastly, I haven't seen anything else on this yet, but the Telegraph is reporting that Biden is intending to ask Congress for what's being called a, quote, one and done $100 billion aid package to Ukraine that's supposed to last until the 2024 elections. And I don't know if this is, like, legitimate because I've only seen it on this one source, but it would not surprise me if, like, this comes up next week. And I think that the only thing that may interfere with that is now we have this conflict with Israel and Palestine. So that may put this, possible aid package on the back burner. But with Biden, like, who the fuck knows?
Well, I will feel better if there is someone like Jim Jordan, because now, I mean, they can tell the Democrats now, like, we don't have this. We have to support Israel. We can't just send another blank check to Ukraine. So we really need someone like Jim Jordan to like put some sense on this. And like, I know we talked about this last time, but people were talking about like, can't we just get Trump like on a temporary basis until they figure it out? And like, I would love to see someone that like actually, is strong and respected in the world, like get in there for a little bit to try to figure this out, because this is not good territory that we're in. And, I was thinking about it, and it's like everyone, all the nations that joined BRICS that we talked about like a few episodes back, when you map it out, they're all a lot of them are surrounding Israel. And the
Mhm.
only country that is somewhat, on, I guess, more the side of like the UN, I don't know that they're really on Israel's side, is Turkey. And what happened recently that I didn't know about, because no one's talking about it other than like Newsweek, was that the US shot down Turkey's armed drones just recently, just like
Yes.
so
Yeah.
the one, possible ally that's right there on the Israeli border, like we kind of pissed off. And then you've got these other nations that are now backed by BRICS, which means China and Russia. I mean, this is like, are we in World War III already? Is what I'm wondering. And back to what I said in the beginning, like all these coincidences. Why now is he building the border wall? Why now is FEMA doing a national emergency test for the second time in history? They've only done
Mhm.
it one other time. Like, what is happening behind the scenes that they know that we don't yet know? And could it be that we're already in war? Because now we've got Israel and Ukraine in a hot war.
Yeah. And meanwhile, we have a Congress that is a fucking clown show
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
can't even decide on anything, and nobody's on the same page.
Right. And I mean, you guys know how I am with like the TikToks. Like, I know I take everything with a grain of salt, but I do like hearing from people that are there in Israel, and there are a ton of them posting videos and what's going on. And one guy made a really good point. He's like, all of these attacks and bombs, and he was showing like in the city what was happening. He's like, this didn't come from outside. This came from inside. Like there are people inside that, were here already. And so it just made me think about our border and how many people are here already, just waiting for something like this to happen and for the US to get involved so they can then, put their people in action here on the ground in the United States, which we haven't seen in a long time. And I don't feel confident having someone like Biden in control. And like you said, Congress being a total shit show. So this is real. Shit's getting real. And everyone just needs to like, I think, pay attention to what's going on and just have a plan in place with your family if shit goes crazy, because it's likely. I mean, I wouldn't just ignore it and hope it goes away. I would have some kind of plan in place for how you're going to deal with this. What a great way to start off the week, right? Happy Monday, everyone.
Yes.
Well, this is unfolding quickly, so we'll keep everyone posted. Make sure you're following us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken, because that's where, we can just post stuff throughout the day. And we'll see you back here on Wednesday to tell you about some exciting news going on with Tara. So everyone tune in then, and thanks for tuning in today. If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.